Episode 4 of True Detective is here, and this was definitely the most haunting episode that we've had this season. Whilst it didn't necessarily provide many answers or give new clues, what it did do was draw us into the Night Country even more, feel a part of its world and get immersed within the horrors that lied within what feels like the never-ending darkness. This episode was more focused on the characters and their development rather than a development of the case and the scientists. So with that, I thought I'd delve into the episode, break it down and share my thoughts on it. Here is True Detective Season 4 Episode 4 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Liz's obsession with the video and her relationship with Leah. One thing that really stood out to me in this episode was Liz and her relationship with her stepdaughter Leah. With this episode being set over Christmas, it was an episode where in a normal world, togetherness would be at the heart of it. But everybody that we saw in the show was experiencing Christmas in a way that meant that they were either on their own in a physical sense or a mental sense. And this was the case with Liz and Leah, with Leah going to stay at Pete's house. When the episode opened, the TV static that we're all used to hearing when the episode begins continued on, as the white noise that was present in the show that Liz was listening to played under the scene. This was as she was looking at the video of Annie K being killed in the ice caves at 3:20 in the morning, showing that it was plaguing her mind. Following this moment, we saw that Liz walked into Leah's room and checked in on her and made sure that she was okay. It's clear to see that Liz is worried about Leah and the direction that she's taking in life. It's theorized that there were many people that wanted Annie dead due to the fact that she was protesting about the mining that was taking place. And with Leah getting more in touch with that part of the community and participating in protests, I believe that Liz fears that Leah will end up with the same fate as what Annie had, dead, which will ultimately mean that Liz will end up alone after losing everybody that she ever cared about. Another part in this episode which leaned into that was when Leah painted the word murderers on the entrance to the door of the mining offices. Again, putting herself in a situation and becoming known to the people that may have originally wanted Annie dead. So Liz's conflicting relationship with Leah is something that's definitely weighing heavily on her mind, and judging by the trailer, it seems like that's something that's going to be continuing in the next episode. The white noise being played is something which I find particularly interesting too. It's so silent where they live in Ennis that Liz requires some noise to almost not go insane with the level of quietness that's present. This is something which also tied into what Rose said when she said how when she moved to Ennis, Alaska, she realized just how quiet it was, other than all of the dead. The white noise, in my mind, represents the chaos that's just going around inside of Liz's head. Whether it be the Annie K case, the case of the scientists, her relationship with Leah, or the death of Jake and Holden, showing that there's just so much going on. But on the outside, there's just complete silence, and it's only when there's that silence that the white noise becomes so loud. The curse that Navarro speaks of in its connection to the orange. During this episode, we saw that Navarro admitted her sister into the lighthouse where she thought that she'd be kept safe. However, we saw the opposite actually happen. When Julia was admitted to the lighthouse, there was an orange that rolled out from underneath her bed, and when she looked under there, she saw her mother lying there dead, but then she opened her eye. We've seen an orange appear a good few times in the show now. We've seen it in the title sequence a couple of times. We saw that Navarro had an orange appear underneath her in the previous episode, and it obviously appeared in this episode too, with Navarro saying that it takes them one by one and that the curse was now ready to take her. Maybe the orange has something to do with that. Dating back to the movie The Godfather, oranges tend to be symbolic of death in TV and film, and that's something that this episode of the show stuck with. With Navarro having seen the orange already, I wonder if that means that there's a similar fate that's going to be there for her. One thing that was interesting about Julia's death was that she folded up her clothes and walked out onto the ice, just like what we presumably saw the scientists do. This is something that Evangeline hasn't picked up on yet, but I'm sure the connection will eventually be bridged together when she sees the scene of what happened. It seems like Evangeline has the ability to see the dead, just like how Rose can, and that could well be a part of the curse that she speaks of. What's interesting about all of the dead that she's seen is that they've pretty much pointed in the same way that her mother pointed towards her all of those years ago, when we saw the flashback taking place where her mother didn't look like she was in the best mental condition. Was her mother driven to the point of insanity because of the same curse that plagued the mind of Julia and will now also plague Evangeline? Maybe. Could she have been pointing to the dead that she saw? She could well have been too, but for now, we just don't know the levels of what the curse truly is. Lund said in the previous episode, "Your mother is waiting for you." So it very much feels like the dead that Evangeline is seeing want to take her with them, marking the third and final intention of what the dead can want when they show themselves, according to Rose that is. Whilst we're in the middle of the video, I just want to let you all know that I broke down the opening title sequence to True Detective Season 4, something that is absolutely packed with clues. So if you want to watch that video after you finished watching this breakdown, then it's in the card in the top corner. The bleeding ears. Right at the end of the episode, Liz and Evangeline were inside of the Dredges, which was an abandoned building which had essentially just been left to rot and was a reminder of what it once was. They went there with the intention of finding Raymond Clark, but instead found Otis Heiss. Whilst Liz was dealing with Otis, the curse that Evangeline spoke of seemed to become more present as she ended up seeing the body of her sister in the water, footprints on the floor, then her sister right behind her. Right at the end of the episode, she was looking at a Christmas tree that was there, and then when Liz got to her, we saw that her ears were bleeding. This could mean a couple of different things. When Evangeline saw Julia, Julia screamed extremely loud. This could be the cause of the bleeding ears, because the noise could have been piercingly loud. However, when looking at what the symbolic reasoning behind bleeding ears actually means, it could actually tie into what's happening in the show. For example, in certain cultures, bleeding ears are said to be a spiritual sign or a message from a different realm. Could this realm be the Night Country in the context of the show? In certain Native American cultures, bleeding ears were said to symbolize a connection with spirits or ancestors. This is exactly what's happening with Navarro, as there are connections that are being made between herself and spirits from beyond the realm that we know. Whether it be her mother, Julia, or even Liz's son, there are people that are trying to reach out to her, all with different reasons. When looking at Rose's 3 reasons as to why the dead appear, to visit, to tell you something, or to take you away, we've got Julia who could have been visiting, Liz's son who's trying to tell her something, and her mother who could be trying to take her away. So it's definitely interesting seeing how this is developing. Plus, in other cultures, bleeding ears are said to be a sign of danger, misfortune, or death being on the horizon, with that being linked to the ever-present orange that we keep seeing that's loosely associated with death. What's to say that Evangeline may be set to face a moment that puts her between life and death? The development of the case. The case was something which I feel definitely took a bit more of a backseat when compared to the last few episodes, as this one really tried to lean into the development of the characters and give us a deeper insight, which is something that I didn't mind. In terms of the case, what we learned this week was that in the video of Annie K, moments before she was killed inside of the ice cave, the power cut out, just like what it did with Raymond Clark in the video that was filmed of him in the first episode. As well as that, it was presumed that Annie K was killed inside of the ice cave and then transported into the storage unit in the town to make a message from the killing that was carried out. These caves were presumed to be bordering Brooks Range, which is a mountainous region in Alaska that has caves located right by it. As the episode went on, we saw that Oliver Tagak was visited by Pryor and Evangeline, and when they went to the Nomad camp, he was gone. When Pete walked in there, he said that it felt like, and didn't say what it was. I'm presuming he felt like it was like when they went into the Salal Research Center for the first time, where there were no signs of any of them leaving and it was just like they left mid-meal. Exactly what Oliver's place was like. On top of his hut, there were antlers that were on the roof, something which I can never not look at without thinking of Dora Lang from Season 1. And also there were 2 drawings of the spiral, one with it ingrained into a stone and another where it was drawn on a piece of cardboard that was on the floor. So this showed that Oliver Tagak was very much involved in what was occurring. When Liz and Evangeline were going after Raymond Clark after believing that they saw a sighting of him, it turned out to actually be Otis Heiss in Annie K's jacket, an individual who was known to have suffered the same injuries that the researchers did, like the burnt retinas. However, he survived. There was no cause of the accident that was listed, and he was somebody that was quite hard to trace, as there weren't many records of him, just like what we saw with Oliver Tagak. When Liz cornered Otis Heiss, we saw him cowering in the corner, and he mentioned how Raymond Clark had gone back down to hide, and that he was hiding in the Night Country, and that as well, everybody was now in the Night Country too. This was very similar to Season 1 of True Detective when Childress was talking about Carcosa when they entered it, so it does feel like it's very similar to what we saw in Season 1. and that now what feels like the never-ending darkness was present in Ennis, it was time for all of those who were part of this cult that seems to be present in the area to act in the name of the Night Country, just like they did for Carcosa and the Yellow King. I'm just hoping that they're going to bridge the connection between Season 1 and Season 4 with regards to how the symbol ended up on the other side of the states. Other details. There were a few other side stories that were present in this episode that came to light a bit more. The first that stuck out to me was about Rose. We learned that before Rose came to Ennis, she had a completely different life, worked in a different profession, had a different name, and that she just upped and left one morning after coming to the realization that she wanted something a bit different. This has made me raise my suspicions about the character just a little bit. What if she's not who she portrays herself as? She was cooking a large feast. Who for? Surely not just herself. Plus, as well, what if she's involved in the Night Country cult in some way? She was the person who found the bodies, obviously through Travis. She was also aware of the spiral symbol, something which nobody else in the entirety of Ennis seems to really know about, other than the people that are introduced to it. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on all things Rose moving forward. Another part of the story which got a main focus was Pete and his wife Kayla, and the fact that their relationship is being damaged due to the work that he's doing. It was Christmas Eve and he was out working late instead of being back home with the family. We've seen tension brewing between the couple since the first episode, and we saw it reach its peak in this episode where he said to her that he knew that she felt as though he ruined her life because she didn't want to have the baby. I wonder if we're going to be seeing Pete following in his father's footsteps, and it almost showing us that a byproduct of the job that they do is the demise of the relationships with the people that they care about most. We saw every officer was on their own at Christmas, and maybe Pete's fate is one that's going to be similar to his father's. Overall review. I thought this was a good episode of the show. I don't think it was the best of the season. I think maybe that goes to last week, but it was a good way of being able to delve into the characters' minds a bit more whilst also seeing the story develop slightly. This was definitely the most haunting episode that was present, and the scene where Evangeline turned around and Julia screamed was a moment that was just a pure jump scare, but it worked. I like the horror element of this season, and I think they're actually doing a really convincing job with it. It doesn't feel shoehorned in because the environment that's being created does feel like one that's just simply scary to be in. I thought Callie Reese did a real good job in this episode and she stole it for me. I thought she had some great moments, such as the love that we saw her having for her sister, along with the reaction to her sister's death, plus also the final scene too. She's just as interesting of a character as what the cases are, so I'm looking forward to seeing more about her and just how her story is going to wrap up. With only 2 episodes to go in the season, I genuinely have no idea how they're going to wrap it up so quickly, unless they have like an hour-and-a-half episode for the finale, which I wouldn't actually be opposed to. So, until next week, I guess.